Hi everyone. Imagine arriving home from work, noticing your wife's car isn't on the drive. This in itself is not an indication of impending doom. Opening the front door, greeting your dog, walking into the kitchen and noticing an A4 nail art. You inspect the couple of sheets of A4 and discover that it is a Dear John letter from your wife of almost 20 years, saying she's done a runner. It was the last Friday in June of 2015. In terms of the construction of this narrative, fortuitously exactly in the middle of the decade. While my wife planned a lot in this meticulously executed ghosting, I'm not sure that was an agenda item. The letter revealed a litany of facts: that she had left, that she wanted a divorce, the papers of which arrived through the letterbox the following morning with her financial demands. She worked at a solicitor's and had pretty much orchestrated the whole thing in secret. A handful of accusations that didn't really make much sense, but cut deeply. Some cast because she had locked out access to all the shared accounts, and they were all shared accounts. So without her gratefully received stipend, I'd have literally had no money. Oh, and asking me not to mistreat Daisy Dog. I rang her brother and got his wife. She knew nothing about what was going on, but gave me the number of her parents. Shortly after that, she'd obviously rang her brother and I got a text. It was a very sad text. It was essentially expressing regret and saying goodbye, as he knew that family ties and the rules of how these things go meant we'd probably never speak again. As predicted, that was our last communication. I rang her, and it was like speaking to a different person. She portrayed the narrative of an abused person, and that I was the abuser. I mean, even now, that's hard to say, and even now, that hurts. Those words on that evening will probably never cease to hurt, no matter how distant they become. And also, it's sensitive, right? I mean, currently, because in these times, you're supposed to just believe such accusations when the woman makes them. But I can assure you in this scenario, they were falsehoods to justify our actions, the reasons for which were substantially different. Our conversation the following morning when I was in bed reading through the divorce papers was more balanced. But I actually came to realise that that was actually a very strategic play to position the demands in the letter I'd opened earlier. I went to my solicitors a week later and she actually refused to accept my instructions on the grounds of my emotional state. Reading the letter and being abused on the phone was a tsunami of confusion and emotion. Confusion because I'd not consciously seen this coming. Emotionally because she was accusing me of holding her hostage in terms of her financial and personal freedoms, and emotionally controlling her like some sort of cult leader. It was brutal because if you're more towards the self-reflective end in your personality and have a medium sense of emotional intelligence, those things are an advantage, but in times like these it can be crippling. It's crippling because you're not self-centered or egotistical enough to not actually think that some of this might be your fault and you may have contributed to it. You never assume you didn't. So the accusations hit home and send you into a spiral of blame, most of which you take fully on yourself. Of course, I dealt with it the only way I knew how. Since she wouldn't physically speak to me, I wrote letters in the form of long texts in the first month. Not accepting any of the accusations, but explaining how I thought we'd both changed over time, but that our life was actually on the cusp of transforming into something great, and we could possibly be bolder. And I think in a way that's where I placed the blame. Not that so much that I was in any way psychologically controlling, not that I was in any way limiting what she could do in her life, but that maybe we both could have thought bigger. These letters are deeply saddening. I suspect they might still be on a phone somewhere. And ironic, obviously, considering how we started our relationship, which was via letters. Shortly after leaving, she booked a hotel. Now, I only knew this because she had the boldness to book it on my account with my accumulated points from my consultancy time, which was really weird. Right? Only weeks after leaving, she was booking a hotel with a resource that was sort of technically mine to go to a concert. She was essentially spending the last remaining bounty from the consultancy years. It seemed she was fine and getting on with life. She'd been going to these concerts for a year or more with a new group of friends. And obviously she was just continuing. She obviously felt no remorse at all. I mean, these are concerts she went to independently and freely despite being in a controlling relationship. Makes no sense. I felt there was going to be someone else in that room. Why I felt that, I wasn't really sure at the time. I was still blaming myself, right? So I just maybe assumed it was that. It was actually a few months before I realised why I felt that, because my subconscious mind knew exactly what was going on. This was the moment my unconscious mind recognised the pattern my conscious mind did not. It was the equivalent of her sleeping with my friend after breaking up with her first husband, right? She only left her first marriage differently but very abruptly, and only did it when she had somewhere to go. And while not physically betraying the relationship until she split, she did promptly after. It was over the course of the 18 months or so after that I realised that I'd been treated exactly like the husband before me. And I guess in some ways, some of you might say that is a form of justice, and I am willing to take that on the chin. A well-executed secret plan, followed by a ghosting, in order to flee to another man who did exist, which she had emotionally betrayed her partner with, but not physically, but probably did promptly after, to pursue a life in another geographical region with a friend group that man was part of. Boom! To quote J.M. Barrie or the Cylons, all this has happened before and will happen again. I came to understand the exact degree to which it's the truth. I'll obviously never know, as she essentially had a midlife crisis. She'd gone crashing into menopause at 43 due to having an operation the year before, and that was for sure a life evaluating event. I won't say I fully understand it, I'll say to a degree I get it. She'd become wrapped up with a group of friends, engaging in all the things she did not get to do when she was a teenager. Always a bad sign, right? People reliving their teenage years. She met someone in that group and felt that was the life she wanted, so she took it. It's just a pity she needed to meticulously destroy and break down the person she left behind to justify the actions in her head. And no doubt to those around her as well, right? As part of the process. I'll admit she did try and pull me into that life. Maybe that was an attempt to share it. But let's be clear. This would be like me ghosting my wife because she didn't turn up and play tabletop role-playing games with me, or wasn't part of the group I spoke to while studying for an MBA. The reason is that flimsy. I mean, I should be really angry about it. That's what people tell me. And I was for a very short period of a few months between the long period of grief ending and acceptance kicking in. But I'm also conscious she did this to someone else, but it was me who was the other man. My region, my friend group and geographic region she moved to, and now I wonder how true her stories about her first husband are, and also my friend who she landed with immediately after. Because based on the letter and the two conversations we had before it went to solicitors, I know the narrative she weaved to her new friends about me. I mean, in a way, I feel cheated. I'm supposed to have a midlife crisis, and it's supposed to feature fast cars and young women. But it seems like a midlife crisis has entered the equal opportunities stakes, and, I guess I'm all for it. And I described getting over my divorce as grief when I described the 18 months it took me to recover. Some people may find that strange, but it's exactly the right description. When my wife left, I was forced into a situation in which I was grieving someone who had suddenly died. Okay, I realised they hadn't died, but they were gone 1 minute. They were there in 1 minute and gone the next, right? But I was doing this under the rules of divorce, and this is very hard. When someone dies, you get You get to celebrate them, right? Their life and their time with you. And that's all part of the processing the loss, and the rituals around it support that. When a wife of almost 20 years effectively vanishes from your life, you're supposed to hate her. And the process and rituals are very different. This means what you're going through and the rituals don't match. You can't effectively process the grief. Needless to say, it was absolutely bloody awful, and accounts for a period of time in this so-called decade from about mid-2015 to the end of 2017. Well, you're listening to this video because of the divorce. This channel was born from that divorce. It's why I went to Disney World solo in 2016 and vlogged it. It's why 3 years of vlogs exist, the first half of them being me journaling things I probably should have just wrote in a notebook rather than public videos. But I've not removed them. They're still there to see, but I warn you that they can be pretty brutal, as they're a mixture of emotional honesty and me learning how to be on camera. Not the greatest combination, depending on what you're looking for. Needless to say, life after the period of grief is very different from the first half of this so-called decade. It's the principal reason I'm a very different person at the end than I was at the start. But as we've discussed so far, it's not the only one. Until the next chapter, you can support me by doing a few simple things. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and certainly post a comment, and let's continue to make small great changes to make life a story worth telling.